January 20th, 2026. Davos. A prominent leader steps up to the microphone and admits something startling. He says the global system of rules was never applied fairly, that international principles were enforced selectively. And then he says, "We knew it. And we were part of it." The crowd erupts in applause. But there's a question that goes completely unasked. Who paid the price of those inconsistencies? Because that answer changes everything. Mark Carney, Canada's Prime Minister, just confessed to something extraordinary. He says the powerful nations placed the sign in the window pretending the system was fair while knowing it wasn't. He admits rules were enforced asymmetrically. International law applied, with varying rigor depending on the identity of the accused. Media calls it brave, honest, refreshing. But something is missing from this picture. In this entire speech, this grand confession of complicity, the leader never once mentions who that system destroyed. Not one specific country. Not one community. Not one single life impacted. He admits the system's flaws, but he never names those who paid the price. And this is not an oversight. It's fundamental to how the game is played. Let me explain. Everything he just admitted, the Global South has been saying for 70 years. Decades ago, conferences were held where dozens of nations came together and declared that the global system was imbalanced. The response from the world's powers? They were dismissed as radicals. When countries tried to control their own resources, their leaders were often removed, their governments overthrown. When a major military intervention was launched without broad international approval, leading to immense human cost, there were no consequences for the powerful. And when developing nations pointed all this out, they were labeled anti-progress, conspiracy theorists, or against the established order. For decades, they said exactly what he just said at Davos. And for decades, the response they got was economic pressure and political isolation. So, what changed? The system didn't suddenly become flawed. What changed is who the flaws are affecting. Listen to the reason given for why the system no longer works. He says, great powers now use economic integration as a weapon. They use tariffs as leverage. But hold on. Powerful nations have been doing this for decades. Think about financial programs that required countries to adopt policies that benefited foreign corporations. Think about trade deals written by and for the benefit of the powerful. Think about economic sanctions that carried severe humanitarian consequences. When the powerful did it, it was called free market reform and promoting good governance. But now that it's being done to them, it's called economic coercion. Same actions, different labels. It all depends on who is acting. For decades, his nation prospered while others struggled under the weight of these exact policies. They said nothing. But now that other major powers are using the same playbook against them, now it's time to live in truth. Now fairness is important. This isn't a moral awakening. This is noticing injustice only when you become the target. Look at the structure of this so-called honesty. He admits complicity, but he never names the victims. He acknowledges imbalance, but he offers no apologies. He demands justice for himself, but he doesn't address the ongoing injustices happening elsewhere. This is what power does. It confesses without repenting. It admits fault without offering restitution. It claims a moral awakening while its core behaviors remain unchanged. He uses a story about a powerless shopkeeper forced to display a sign he didn't believe in. But here's the problem. The shopkeeper was forced. He was powerless. The powerful nations weren't forced. They benefited immensely. Using the language of the powerless to describe the actions of the powerful isn't honesty. It's an appropriation of their struggle. The developing world has been living in truth for generations. They were just called liars for it. When they said the system was imbalanced, they were told, "You're just making excuses." When they demanded change, they were accused of trying to destabilize the world order. But when a powerful leader says it, a standing ovation. The hypocrisy isn't hidden. It's right there in the timing. The truth only becomes true when powerful people say it. Justice only seems to matter when their own interests are threatened. So here's the test for this newfound honesty. The next time you see someone praise a leader for finally telling the truth, just ask one simple question: where were you when less powerful voices were saying the exact same thing? Because the truth hasn't changed. What's changed is who is feeling the pressure. The leader admits they participated in a flawed system. He says he's taking down the old sign. But look closer. He's just putting up a new one. The words have changed. The game has not. This speech should be studied, not as an example of courage, but as a masterclass in how power preserves itself, even in a moment of apparent confession. The powerful will celebrate this as honesty. The rest of the world recognizes it for what it is. The powerful finally noticing the system is imbalanced, because it is no longer imbalanced only in their favor. They don't want a level playing field. They just want the advantage back. And that's the truth he'll never tell.